Hi, everybody. We are now on lesson 3, step 7. And what I think you guys probably should have is your iReady writing book out to page 86, which is where you can find step 7. And you should probably have whatever writing you have already done out with you. And you should also probably have that narrative writing checklist that I put in your writing folder or I passed out to you in class, either one. Um, those are those would help you with this lesson, okay? But let's dive right into this, okay? So, step 7: revise second read. Now, I do want to remind you also something that after we have revised in step 6 for our ideas, the elaboration, we did some organization, hopefully in step 6. This revision is going to make sure that your wording is more clear. Okay, so let's follow along with me here on page 86. Once your details are developed and organized, it is time to make sure your events are arranged in a clear and logical sequence. In this step, you'll look for places to use transitional words, phrases, and clauses. We did this in the last lesson. So this again is hopefully recognizable to you guys. You're starting to understand that, okay, these are things that are important in writing: transitional words, phrases, and clauses. So in order to make the sequence events clear, let's go through this lesson. We'll see what Lily Al-Farsi has done in the Davy Crockett text, and then we'll go over and we'll talk about our own, okay? So you can describe whether events, I'm reading here for you guys in your book, please follow along again. You can describe whether events happen before or after each other. So at the beginning of the sentence it says, at first, Pipkin couldn't believe his eyes, but then he saw Pup grab something solid. Or you can say, you can also describe whether two or more events happen at the same time. Now, if they happen at the same time, you could say, as Pipkin raced away, Pup whimpered. Meanwhile, the hounds were gaining. You can use these words, and hopefully you will. Often these words come up in legend writing. So, meanwhile, as and meanwhile. So, as this is happening, meanwhile, something else is happening at the same time. That's what they're talking about. Down below that in the box, it says before, after, and at the same time. We're going to probably use these. I'll encourage you guys to use these in your writing. So this revision is all about that. Let's take care of this right now. All right. I'm gonna let you guys look at that on your own. But we're gonna look down at the modeled instruction down here where Lily Al-Farsi has written her Davy Crockett stuff. But over here, number 1, it says the writer, Lily, used the underline clause because it's already underlined for us. That's why we're going to go over to number 1 now. The writer used the underline clause to show two events happening at the same time. What are those two events? So, the underlined area says as his gator approached, right? Actually, it isn't. Yeah, as his gator approached. The writer used the underlined clause to show two events happening at the same time. What are those two events? And it says, as his gator approached, he took light, fluffy biscuit out of his pocket and tossed it over the gator's head. So, that shows two events. What are those two events? What do you guys think those two events are? It says right there, Davy, on the other hand, thought fast. As his gator approached, he took the biscuit out of his pocket and tossed it over the gator's head. Those are the two events. Number 2 says underline, underline. Another phrase that signals two events happening at the same time. And describe those two events. Well, let's go through this. It's obviously not what we just talked about here. So let's start with after where he tossed it over the gator's head. Surprised, the gator snatched at the biscuit, grabbing it and chewing it up. Is there anything there? No. The biscuit was so delicious that the gator closed its eyes in pleasure. Not two events happening at the same time. While the gator was distracted, Davy got his hands around it and flipped. Are those two things happening at the same time? Yes, they are. While the gator was distracted, it was eating this delicious biscuit. Davy got his hands around it and flipped it, tying it tightly. So those things happen at the same time. So that you use your own way to describe those two events. Now, number 3 says, draw a box around the word that tells when the judges are finished arguing. The word that tells when the judges are finished arguing. Let's have a look at this. The judges argued for an hour, yelling and shouting and shaking their fists. Are they done yet? No. Eventually, however, they ruled that the biscuits were allowed. Eventually. That probably needs a box around it. You're welcome. All right, now, you get it? That was a guided mentor text, all right? So this is what Lily was thinking, and this is hopefully how you guys will be thinking with your writing. Let's go on to the next page, 87, and let's look at a little bit more about Lily's done here. Read the following paragraph from an early draft of the mentor text, then use the hints to complete the activities that follow. Always use those hints. Let's read it. Let's read it together. There it is, mentor text. Davy Crockett strode into the ring and the crowd watched eagerly. The wranglers brought in an enormous alligator. Crockett faced his gator and shouted, "Are you ready for me?" The gator, not saying a word, lunged at Crockett. Davy straddled the gator and flipped it on its back. Then, like a cowboy roping a steer, he tied the gator's front and back legs together. All right, number 4 down here says, read the following sentences from the draft. Davy Crockett strode into the ring and the crowd watched eagerly. The wranglers brought in an enormous alligator. And the writer wants to show that the wrangler's action is happening when Davy enters the ring. How should the writer revise the second sentence? Circle the correct answer. This is simple. All you have to do is circle A, B, C, or D. All right? Which one do you think? Which one will show the wrangler's action happening when Davy enters the ring? So they have to happen at the same time. And the hint, it says the hint, which answer choice shows Davy and the wranglers moving at the same time? Now, if you'll notice, A, B, C, and D all have the same ending. The beginning is different. So the ending says, well, A, in a few moments, the wranglers brought in an enormous alligator. Does that show that Davy and the wranglers are moving at the same time? No. And then B says, before that happened, the wranglers brought in an enormous alligator. That doesn't show them happening at the same time. C, meanwhile, the wranglers brought in an enormous alligator. That does kind of show happening at the same time. So eventually, that's D. D says eventually the wranglers brought in an enormous alligator. And eventually eventually. That happens later. So C is the correct answer. That's the right answer. That sounds the best because meanwhile is conveying that it's happening at the same time. Number 5 says, read the following sentences from the draft, just like we did before. It's going to be the same kind of question. The gator, not saying a word, lunged at Crockett. Davy straddled the gator and flipped it on its back. And the writer wants to show Davy's action happening just after the gator charges. Which is the best revision for the writer to make? Circle the correct answer. All you got to do is circle the A, B, C, or D. Which is the right one, please? I will read them, and I will let you guys choose which one is the best one here, okay? We want to show the actions happening just after the gator charges. So, A, after a few moments, Davy straddled the gator and flipped it on its back. That is afterwards, but that's after a few moments. All right. B, before that happened, Davy straddled the gator and flipped it on its back. C, within a minute, Davy straddled the gator and flipped it on its back. That seems like it's taken a long time. An instant later, Davy straddled the gator and flipped it on its back. The hint. Read the hint. The hint says, which answer choice shows Davy's actions happening as quickly as possible? A, B, C, or D. I'll let you guys figure it out, okay? Now, I'm going to... You guys do this kind of same thing to your writing. Go through your writing and look at it. See if you can have these kind of transitional words in your writing that will make your writing better, okay? We will be in class together this week, so yay. You might be watching this in class, you might be watching at home. If you have any questions, either raise your hand or message me, all right? Good luck.